Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmission's weekly Q&A. I'm your boy Dan, and we've got some really fun, really awesome questions to dive into, so let's get right to it. So for our first question, Smart asks, is Dr. Pershing the creator of Snoke? So it's actually already been established in the current canon that both the Sith Eternal and Darth Sidious were responsible for Snoke's creation, not Dr. Pershing. So the Rise of Skywalker novelization, the canon novel Shadow of the Sith, which I've mentioned that novel a few times in some of my live streams, it is spectacular. It is so good. One of the best Star Wars novels in either canon or legends. I can't recommend it enough. But those novels, along with several different reference books, encyclopedias, they've all basically established that the Sith Eternal, Sidious, they were responsible for Snoke's creation. And the Sith Eternal, they were the cult that basically worshipped the Sith and worshipped Darth Sidious and were helping Darth Sidious on Exegol as he was building up the First Order and eventually the Final Order. And so they were responsible for Snoke's creation. And essentially what happened was, as the Sith Eternal were working on creating different clones that Sidious could use as vessels, so different Force-sensitive clones that Sidious could transfer his essence into, eventually they wound up creating Snoke. And so here's a quote from of Darth Sidious from the reference book Secrets of the Sith. So, as part of their genetic experiments, my followers had attempted to create another being that came to be known as Snoke. Although his body proved unworthy of containing my dark side essence, Snoke's natural sensitivity to the Force would make him a powerful puppet nonetheless. And the followers that Sidious is referring to in that quote is, of course, the Sith Eternal. So we know that the Sith Eternal were responsible for creating Snoke, but with that said, there is definitely a possibility that Pershing's work could have helped the Sith Eternal, could have helped Sidious in their efforts to create Force-sensitive clones that eventually led to Sidious. I definitely think that, to Snoke. I definitely think that that's a possibility. It's not been entirely clear at this point in the current canon if that's what, let's go back to that. If that's what Lucasfilm is essentially setting up at this point, that Pershing and his research, his work, his experimentations helped lead to Snoke. So we saw some of this in the current, well, actually, we've been seeing this throughout The Mandalorian, really, that Moff Gideon seems to be, he seemed to be in charge of Pershing's cloning work and his experimentation, but that he was also hiding that work from the Shadow Council. I think that the Shadow Council probably had an idea what Gideon was up to, and Gideon might have even been tasked specifically by the Shadow Council to use Dr. Pershing to work on creating Force-sensitive clones for Sidious. So maybe the Shadow Council specifically tasked him with perfecting that cloning process that then the Sith Eternal could be able to utilize to create Force-sensitive clones for Sidious, because the Sith Eternal, basically, they were using Clone Wars era technology to create the clones for Darth Sidious, and we got to see some of that, how the Empire was able to acquire that cloning technology. We got to see that in the Bad Batch. After the destruction of Kamino, the Empire basically took the technology, took the information and research that the Kaminoans had on Kamino and in Tipoca City, and then they basically stole it from the Kaminoans. So I like that we are seeing in the Bad Batch and in the Mandalorian basically how the Sith Eternal were eventually able to create those Force-sensitive clones for Darth Sidious. Like I said, it hasn't been specifically clear if Pershing's work was utilized by the Sith Eternal, but I definitely think that there's a good chance that that could be the case. I also think that it's likely that Gideon did wind up sharing information from Pershing's research, from maybe some of the research that he did after Pershing was captured. I think some of that research and that information was probably shared with the Shadow Council. We don't know how much, if any, but I think it's probably likely at least some of what Moff Gideon was doing was shared with the Shadow Council, and then that research could have been utilized by the Sith Eternal to create Snoke and these Force-sensitive clones that Sidious would use. It seems to me that at least in some part, the storylines that we've been seeing in The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch, they have been trying to give an audience and give the audience and Star Wars fans a better understanding of how Darth Sidious was able to return in The Rise of Skywalker. And so because of that, I do think that there's a chance that we're going to eventually find out that Pershing's work, his specific research, his specific experimentation was used by the Sith Eternal. They took that research, that experimentation information, and then they used those to create various clones that Sidious could use to transfer his essence into and to prolong his life. But as of right now, like I said, that hasn't been established yet in canon. I kind of think that that's where Lucasfilm is going at this point, that they're starting to pave the way for Pershing's work, for the the Imperial Remnants cloning efforts, that research and that experimentation was used for Sidious. There's the possibility that Project Necromancer, which we heard Project Necromancer mentioned in, was it chapter 22? It was the 7th episode of the current season. I can't remember specifically which chapter it was. I want to say it was chapter 22. But we heard the mentioning of Project Necromancer, and maybe that project, that's the official title for the work that's being done by the Empire to create these Force-sensitive clones that Sidious could use to, again, transfer his essence into, to prolong his life, and then eventually wind up with creating Snoke. I'm going to say that I think Project Necromancer is not specifically involved with the cloning efforts by the Empire. I think that Project Necromancer is a little bit different, something separate from the cloning efforts by Pershing and other Imperials, which I did a video on that, so I would recommend going and check that out. But I think Project Necromancer is something that's a little bit different. But at any rate, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest bit at this point if we see in future Mandalorian episodes, or if we start to see some novels or comics that take place during this time period. Well, there's currently a Mandalorian comic series, and I haven't read any of the issues yet. And now that I'm saying this, I kind of want to go through those issues and see, because I'm wondering if there are any bits of information that we get in the comics that are not in the series. Typically, or I should say, my thought is that the comics are probably going to be very show accurate, and they're pretty much only going to dive into what's in the show. But maybe we might get some stuff that doesn't appear in the show take place in the comic. And so I say this because it wouldn't shock me if in a comic, in a book, we start to learn more about Pershing, his work during his time as an Imperial, and how that work could have been used to create Snoke and then to create these clones for Darth Sidious. So I think that would be cool. Sonia, welcome to the chat. Glad you're joining us. Liam, welcome to the chat. My day's going pretty well. I am kind of bummed that the weekend has flown by, but other than that, my day has gone pretty well. All right, so let's move and groove on to the next question. So for our next question, El Pepe asks, what is your most watched Star Wars movie, and which was your first? So I kind of talked about this in a previous Q&A, but I can't specifically remember which Star Wars movie was specifically the first one that I watched. Some of my earliest Star Wars memories are from when I was like 4 to 6 years old. and a lot of them are mainly the surrounding The Empire Strikes Back. So I'm going to say that was probably the first Star Wars movie that I watched. I'm not 100% sure. As I mentioned in a live stream some time ago, none of my family members are really Star Wars fans. Like my brother, my one brother can get down with Star Wars, but not really that much. So I kind of like this. I think I discovered Star Wars on my own, but I honestly am not too sure. So I think it was The Empire Strikes Back. If I had to guess, I would say it was The Empire Strikes Back or maybe Return of the Jedi. I had those remastered. There was like the box set VHS of the original trilogy. I had those that I would watch all the time. I used to watch those a ton when I was a youngling. And then as I got older, once the prequels came out, Revenge of the Sith, I wound up getting the DVDs of all the movies, and I would watch Revenge of the Sith a ton. That is a movie that I've watched a lot over the years. And then, before we got the sequel trilogy, if I felt like I wanted to watch a Star Wars movie, typically I'd be like, I kind of want to watch Revenge of the Sith. And then once we got the Clone Wars and some of the other shows and then the sequels, I've kind of been more that if I want to watch something Star Wars, it's typically I'm going to go and watch a show. So the Clone Wars, Rebels, now the Mandalorian, Obi-Wan. I'm sure some people are going to probably want to go ham on me for saying this, but now if I want to watch a movie, a Star Wars movie, typically it's The Last Jedi. Like, if I'm going to say I'm going to watch a Star Wars movie from start to finish, typically I put on The Last Jedi. I freaking love The Last Jedi. So that's usually one of my go-tos now. But yeah, if I had to say which one is the film I've watched the most over the years, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and then Revenge of the Sith, and then most recently, definitely The Last Jedi. All right, so next up, Piff Lewis asks, will there ever be a pink or a yellow lightsaber? So in the current canon, we have actually seen yellow lightsabers and magenta lightsabers, which I'm going to say magenta looks very pink to me. So to me, a magenta lightsaber I'm going to say is pink. So I'll give you guys some examples of both. So the lightsaber pikes that the Jedi Temple Guards use, and though they can be seen in both the Clone Wars and in Rebels, they're yellow bladed. We've also seen some Jedi, let's make this a little bit larger, Jedi such as Loden Greatstorm from the High Republic. Istala Maru is another Jedi from the High Republic that has a yellow lightsaber. And then Kevmo Zink. All three of those Jedi have a yellow lightsaber. That's one of the things that I absolutely love about the High Republic is that we get to see different color lightsabers that we don't normally see. I would love if we start to see some Jedi during the High Republic that have like orange lightsabers. Although I feel like orange, we're seeing that now with the Ahsoka trailers. I feel like orange could be associated more with the Sith or with a dark side Force user or a dark Jedi. But I would love to see something like orange. Maybe some wild like greens, like teal or some other blues. I think that would be a lot of fun. But I would like to definitely start to see more variation of lightsaber colors in some of the Star Wars content that we get. And I love that we get to see that in the High Republic. In terms of, let's go back here. In terms of pink or magenta, we've seen that in Jedi Fallen Order and now Jedi Survivor. Cal Kestis, once you get to a certain point in the game, you can actually change the color of your lightsaber to be, I want to say it's something like 10 different colors. I don't know the exact number, but you could choose a wide selection of different colors to have your lightsaber. And so one of them is magenta. And again, like I said, to me, magenta very much looks pink. It's kind of like a pinkish purple, but I'm going to say it's pink. And yeah, like look at that. That to me is pink. And yeah, so Cal's was the first lightsaber in canon with pink. But we do get my homegirl Venestra Rowe. Technically, her lightsaber is purple. If you go to Venestra Rowe's Wikipedia, or you look her up on the databank, or you like look up, I think you could find, excuse me, I think you could find Venestra Rowe's lightsaber in the databank on StarWars.com. Not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be listed as purple. But to me, that looks very much like pink, and I love that her lightsaber is a light whip, which is so dope. What's the name of the novel? Oh man, I can't remember the name of the novel where they dive into her light whip and how she had these force visions about that came to her and that led her to creating a light whip. But yeah, that looks very pink to me, very magenta pink to me. Here's another image of Venestra Rowe, and you can see again that looks more pink to me than it does purple. But technically her lightsaber is purple, but I'm going to say that, yeah, other than Cal's magenta lightsaber, Venestra Rowe is another decent example of a pink or a magenta lightsaber. And then because of the footage that we got at Star Wars Celebration, we know that Venestra Rowe is going to appear in The Acolyte, which is dope because we might get to see her wielding her pink or purple lightsaber. And dude, I am like, when I saw that Venestra Rowe was we got that shot of her in The Acolyte, I was so pumped because she has a freaking light whip. So we could absolutely get to see Venestra Rowe wielding a light whip in live action in The Acolyte. How freaking sick would that be? Like, the moment I saw that, I was so pumped because I thought that would be incredible to see. It's funny, when I was younger, I did not like the colors pink or purple. Now I love those colors. I mean, look at the channel, look at the live stream. It's all pink and purple. I like to have Cal Kestis rock purple lights. I kind of go back and forth with Cal's lightsaber. Usually it's between like green, pink, and magenta. Those are the colors that I typically like to rock with Cal's lightsaber. I have an Ultra Saber lightsaber that I could change the color of, and typically I rock like a purple color for that lightsaber. So yeah, I really like pink and purple now, and I am so pumped that we might get to see Venestra Rowe's lightsaber in The Acolyte. I think that would be a lot of fun. All right, so let's keep moving and grooving. So Michael Moses asks, what's the likelihood of Lucasfilm making a Thrawn trilogy? So all signs at this point are pointing to Lucasfilm incorporating different aspects of Timothy Zahn's Legend Thrawn trilogy, the book trilogy, into all of these Disney Plus shows that are taking place during the New Republic era. Right, that era is taking place roughly sometime between around 8 to 9 ABY, so 8 to 9 years after the Battle of Yavin. And so what we've gotten so far, all signs are pointing to Lucasfilm utilizing some plot points from Timothy Zahn's trilogy of novels, the Legends novels. I don't know if Lucasfilm is going to take every single plot point from those novels, but yeah, definitely it is. All signs are pointing to Lucasfilm utilizing some storylines from those novels in these different shows, Disney Plus series, and then Dave Filoni's films. So, right, there's The Mandalorian, Ahsoka. We know that Thrawn is going to appear in Ahsoka. The Skeleton Crew, which is going to be taking place same time period, 8 to 9 ABY, which I had no clue. I was watching a interview that Jude Law did. I can't remember what talk show was it Jimmy Fallon? It was one of those like late night talk shows, and in the interview he was saying that his character is a freaking Jedi. I had no clue that his character is supposed to be a Jedi. So that's kind of dope because I had no clue. But yeah, anyway, those series are all taking place around the same time period. And then we know Dave Filoni's movie, his live action movie, is going to cap everything off. It's going to be the end point to this storyline that Lucasfilm is currently building up. And you'll hear this era being referred to as like the Mandoverse, because all these shows, Dave Filoni's movie, they're incorporating all the same sorts of, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of different characters are going to appear in each of these shows, and in the movies probably. You're going to see storylines probably kind of like crisscrossing between some of these series, which I think is dope. I mean, the MCU has been doing that for a very long time, and it's, I think, in part one of the reasons why the MCU has been so successful for such a long period of time, is getting storylines and characters that are interwoven in between all of these different movies and TV series. That's definitely something that I've enjoyed, and I think Star Wars fans are probably going to enjoy that as well. And so, as Lucasfilm is creating these series, I don't think that we are going to have a carbon copy of the Thrawn Legends trilogy. I think it's going to be, we're going to take stuff from some of these novels and we're going to start to incorporate that into our Disney Plus shows and then in Dave Filoni's movie. I think that's probably the closest that we're going to get to a Thrawn trilogy. But to me, that's still very exciting. Thrawn is a great character. The Legends Thrawn stories are really cool. They're really fun. I think they're super exciting. I would rather Lucasfilm pluck some cool elements from those books than to kind of just, copy them verbatim and utilize them in each of these shows and in Filoni's movie. So I don't know how much of Timothy Zahn's Legends stories are going to be incorporated into the Mandoverse stories, but it wouldn't shock me if a good amount of stuff from those Legends novels will be used in these live action series and in Filoni's films. I mentioned this in a recent a recent Q&A. Was it like two Q&As ago, something like that? To me, it's a slam dunk for Lucasfilm to utilize plot points and storylines from Timothy Zahn's Legends Thrawn trilogy for creating these canon storylines, and for several reasons. So, if you're a Legends fan and you love those the Heir to the Empire novel, and then the rest of that series, getting to see that play out in live action, stuff from those novels would be great. Legends fans would be pumped to see that sort of stuff play out in these live action stories, because the Timothy Zahn Legends novels are very highly regarded. And rightfully so. As I mentioned, the stories are really, really, really cool. So Lucasfilm would be able to bring elements of a fan favorite book trilogy into live action, and hopefully those Legends fans would be on board with it. You would get to introduce some new storylines for people who haven't read those novels. And again, they're really cool. I think, I don't know, a theory that I have for the Ahsoka series is, could those Dark Jedi that we see, could they be clones? I don't know. And I bring that up because one of the main plot points in the Thrawn novels is that he utilizes a clone of a Jedi Master, and that clone winds up being a Dark Jedi. That clone was created by Darth Sidious before he died, and then Thrawn utilizes that clone. His name is Jorah Sabaoth. Utilizes that clone in his fight against the New Republic. What if the Dark Jedi that we see in the Ahsoka trailer could be a clone of a Jedi Master? That's a possibility. It could be a possibility that those are dark Jedis from the past, or Sith from the past, that then Thrawn utilizes in his fight against the New Republic. And see, that's where I think Lucasfilm can pivot a little bit if they start to utilize some aspects of Zahn's story, right? So in Zahn's Legends novels, Jorah Sabaoth was that dark Jedi that Thrawn utilized. Well, what if now in canon, instead of using Jorah Sabaoth, Ahsoka series sets up some dark Jedi coming into the present storyline through the world between worlds, and maybe they're Sith, and maybe they align themselves with Thrawn because they say, hey, this could be our easy path to be able to control the galaxy. That would be sick. I've seen people theorizing that that dark Jedi and what appears to be his apprentice, could that be Darth Bane and Darth Zana? Like, yo, that would be sick. And dude, how exciting would that be? It's not the same exact plot line from the Legends Thrawn trilogy, but it's pretty close, and people would go insane. People would be so excited. I would lose my mind if that were the case. When I saw that theory kind of circulating around the internet, I was like, yo, that would be so sick. So I mentioned this in an Ahsoka video that I did, and then Danny Girl and I, when we did our breakdown of the trailer, we talked about this, that you could see in that trailer, Ahsoka is in the world between worlds. And the world between worlds is this like mystical plane within the Force, and it is outside time and space. And the world between world has these different portals that basically connect to all points in the Star Wars history, the timeline. So, you know, for instance, Ezra Bridger in Rebels in 2 BBY. No, I take that back. In 0 BBY, it was months before the Battle of Yavin, but still 0 BBY. He pulls Ahsoka, who was dueling Darth Vader in 2 BBY, so 2 years before. Ezra pulls Ahsoka into the world between worlds right before Darth Vader potentially could kill her. And he did that because he was in the world between worlds. He had accessed this portal that allowed him to see into the past when Ahsoka was dueling Vader. And right before Vader dealt that killing blow to Ahsoka, Ezra pulled her into the world between worlds. So how sick would it be if these dark Jedi or this Sith, let's say it's Darth Bane, they figure out a way to access the world between worlds. They come into the present timeline that's taking place in the Mandoverse. So again, like 8 to 9 ABY, and then they align themselves with Thrawn. That would be so sick, dude. That would be dope. And even if it's not Darth Bane, that would still be really fun and really exciting. And I think a lot of fans would be very much on board with seeing that play out in the Mandoverse and Filoni's film. I think that'd be really cool. So I say all of that to say that I think that Lucasfilm understands that fans want to see more of what took place in Legends story-wise. They want to see some of that stuff take place in canon. I don't think it's a coincidence that in the Ahsoka trailer, you specifically hear Ahsoka say, you know, Thrawn's the heir to the Empire. That one, I believe it's the first Legends Thrawn novel is called Heir to the Empire. And to me, that was Lucasfilm tipping their cap to Legends fans, kind of like, bro, we got you. We hear you. We're going to be bringing in elements of Legends into our stories moving forward. I think that's the case. To me, at least that is in part why we got that line in the trailer. So I do think that we're going to get elements of those Legends novels, but I don't think it's going to be a straight up trilogy, which I'm cool with. I'm all right with Lucasfilm creating new storylines, and even if they differ from what's in Legends. You know, I've said this before. I like a lot of Legends stuff. There are some really great Legend stories, both novels and comics. But I think sometimes people kind of get lost in the sauce and automatically think, oh, it's Legends, it's 100% better. There is some excellent Legend stuff, and there is some straight up doo-doo Legend stuff. So for me, I'm kind of okay with Lucasfilm saying, hey, we're just going to create new stuff, whether that's not even bringing stuff from Legends into the current canon, or we're gonna pull some bits of what was in Legends into the current canon. But I can understand why if you were a Legends fan and you grew up or you spent many years reading, those comics and those novels, and then not getting some of those stories in the current canon, I could understand to some extent how that would be kind of a bummer. But yeah, I think this is probably going to be the closest thing we'll get to a Thrawn trilogy that takes place during the New Republic. All right, so for our next question, Dr. Easy asks, is Luke Skywalker strong enough to crush Beskar? I think so. I definitely think so. I don't see why he couldn't be. He's a super strong Force user. Now, Beskar was notable for its high tolerance to extreme forms of damage. And in its purest form, as we've seen in The Mandalorian specifically, Beskar was durable enough to withstand blaster shots and could even repel lightsaber strikes. But that doesn't mean that Beskar alloy is indestructible. That doesn't mean that Beskar could not be crushed, as we've seen now in the Mandalorian season 3 finale. So I think, especially with the Force, I don't see why a Force user couldn't crush something made of Beskar. As I mentioned in the finale of The Mandalorian, we see Moff Gideon crush the Darksaber. I saw some people kind of like freak out about Moff Gideon crushing the Darksaber. Like, yo, how could he be that strong to be able to crush the Darksaber? It wasn't specifically stated, but to me, it was obvious. Maybe, I guess it's not as obvious as I thought, that the Dark Trooper armor that Gideon was wearing basically enhanced his strength. It made him stronger. That's why you hear Gideon, when he's giving his villain monologue to Din and the rest of the the rest of the Mandalorians, he's saying to them like, yo, bro, I've upgraded the Dark Trooper. Basically what I've done is we're not making it a droid anymore. We've gone back to it being a suit with a human being inside of it. And instead of having just any Joe Schmo inside of the suit, it's going to be me, my clones. And that's why we see he's got a bunch of different cloning tubes or vats with himself in there, clones of himself in there. And that's why if you hear when he's fighting Din and he's fighting Bo, and then when he crushes the Darksaber, you could hear that sort of like pneumatic kind of like cyborg droid machine kind of noise in the background, and that's supposed to be to signify that the suit is giving him enhanced strength, and that's why he was able to crush the Darksaber, because the Darksaber is made completely of Beskar. So if Gideon could crush the Darksaber, even though it was with strength and enhanced armor, to me, I don't see why a Force user couldn't crush Beskar using the Force, especially when you're talking about someone like Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is supposed to be one of the strongest Force users in galactic history. So for him, to me, I think it would be very easy for him to probably crush Beskar using the Force, especially if we're talking about, Luke Skywalker in 9 ABY, 10 ABY, when you're 5 or even 6 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, when now you're like prime Luke Skywalker. Maybe not prime Luke Skywalker, but yeah, multiple years after Return of the Jedi. To me, I feel like, yeah, Luke Skywalker could probably easily crush Beskar using the Force. So yeah, I would say so. I think that a Force user could crush Beskar using the Force. All right, moving and grooving along. Damn Jam asks, why did Count Dooku lose to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith? I can't shy away from a Revenge of the Sith question. As I mentioned before, I love Revenge of the Sith. So when I saw this, like, oh, hell yeah, I got to answer this question. So the main reason why Anakin defeats Dooku. From a storytelling standpoint, Lucas needed Dooku to die. Lucas needed Dooku out of the way. And instead of doing that off screen, we see that in the beginning of the movie. And the reason why Dooku needed to be pushed aside was so that basically there was a vacancy in the Sith apprentice spot, so that Anakin could slide into that Sith apprentice role under Darth Sidious. And not only does killing off Dooku open up that vacancy for Darth Sidious to then pluck Anakin and use him as his apprentice, but it also helps showcase to Star Wars fans that, yo, look at what Anakin's doing. He's inching closer and closer to the dark side. He's inching closer and closer to becoming Darth Vader, because you hear him when he's got Dooku, right? Like you see here, he's got the lightsabers at Dooku's neck. He's not sure what to do, and we get that infamous line from Darth Sidious, "Do it." And Anakin says, "I don't know. This is not the Jedi way." And then he succumbs to the pressure of Sidious there, and he kills Count Dooku. And so, again, that paves the way for Sidious to be able to find a new apprentice, but it also helps establish that Anakin is moving closer and closer towards becoming Darth Vader. Now, in terms of the canon explanation, I love this. I haven't read the Revenge of the Sith novelization, but I think what I'm going to say is probably in line with what you would find out in the novelization. So in terms of the canon explanation, my thought is that Dooku didn't realize that Sidious was going to kill him. I'm trying to remember. Have we gotten it in another book? I know I've read it somewhere. Like I said, I haven't specifically read the novelization, but I know I've read it somewhere that Dooku had no clue that Sidious was going to kill him, have Anakin kill him. That's why you see like this look here on his face of just utter shock when Sidious tells Anakin to kill him. Dooku did not realize that Sidious wanted Anakin to kill Count Dooku. And initially, Dooku felt like, yo, I could easily mop the floor with this guy. I beat him several years ago back on Geonosis. I've beaten him. They've dueled a couple of times in the Clone Wars. So I'm trying to think. They duel in season 6. When else they had to have dueled at other times? I'm totally drawing a blank. In the Clone Wars, when else they've dueled with each other? But yeah, they've at least dueled several times, and prior to that, Anakin hadn't been able to defeat him. So yeah, my thought is our boy's just thinking, I'm gonna mollywop Anakin here, and that's why you see him taunting Anakin throughout that duel. You see him taunting Anakin, and he's telling Anakin, yes, tap into the dark side, use that part of the Force, because he thought, hey, even if my guy taps into the dark side, he can't beat me. But man, was he wrong, because as their duel goes on, you see Anakin becoming more and more angry, and he's tapping into the dark side, and as the duel progresses, he's tapping more and more into the dark side. And then by the end of it, it's just a breeze for him to defeat Count Dooku. You have to remember, Anakin is, just like Luke, just like his father, one of the strongest Force users in galactic history. So we hear back in the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon saying Anakin had the highest midichlorian count of anyone on record, right? And I love, in The Rise of Skywalker, Charles Soule talks about this. Like, having a high midichlorian count doesn't just necessarily automatically mean you're going to be the strongest Jedi or the strongest Force user. The way Charles Soule talks about it in the Rise of Skywalker comic series is that, think of it like a door. Does he say, is it a door or a dam? I think he says it's a door. And basically, that, you know, the higher your midichlorian count is, the more that door is open and the more it allows you to access the Force. The less of the midichlorian count that you have, the less that door is going to be open. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to access the Force, right? So it doesn't automatically mean that just because you have a higher midichlorian count than me, let's say, that you're automatically going to be a more powerful Force user or the best Force user. Just means you've got more of an advantage. I'm gonna have to work a little bit harder. But in Anakin's case, Anakin was someone with the highest midichlorian count at that point in galactic history, and he really was basically one of the strongest Force users at that point. You know, and by Revenge of the Sith, it's essentially Darth Sidious, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, Anakin, and Yoda. I would say that those are probably the top 5 strongest Force users at that point in the galaxy, right? So think about that in terms of Count Dooku when he's going up against Count Dooku. And this is something that I love. I think is so dope about Anakin. Our boy was just a straight up martial artist. He loved fighting and dueling people and not tapping into the Force, not using the Force to best an opponent. He would want to, as much as possible, not have to use the Force and try to rely on his martial arts skills, his dueling skills to be able to beat someone. And so even someone like Count Dooku that he's going up against, who's going to liberally be utilizing the Force, Anakin would not use the Force when dueling him, which to me is just, it's dope. So now think about that, right? I say all this because now let's go back to Anakin's duel in Revenge of the Sith. These two are dueling. Anakin may or may not be tapping into the Force at this point during their duel, right? Let's just say for argument's sake, he's not. But then Count Dooku starts taunting his ass. And now we see Dooku knock Obi-Wan out and drop that, like, I don't know if you would call it the floor or platform, probably is a better description of it. He uses the Force to drop that platform onto Obi-Wan. Anakin doesn't know if Obi-Wan's dead or not. So on top of Count Dooku angering him, now you've got reason for Anakin to be like, yo, I want to destroy this guy. So at that point, then you start to see him tapping into the dark side. And tapping into the dark side is basically like utilizing steroids. I think that'd be, well, actually, we'll go back to the door analogy. Tapping into the dark side is a quick and easy way for someone to open that door a little bit wider, for someone to be able to access the Force more easily. Again, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a stronger Force user, you're going to be stronger. It just means that, hey, by tapping into the dark side, you're kind of cheating. You're able to open that door open a little bit more than maybe I would be able to at this point. Maybe if I train 5 years from now, I'll be able to open up that door a little bit wider and access more of the Force. But if I take this quick route and tap into the dark side, I'll be able to open it a little bit quicker. All right, that's a good analogy, I would say, between utilizing the light side of the Force and the dark side. And it's not always the case, but I think that's a good analogy. So Anakin starts tapping into the dark side, and then you see him very quickly just work Count Dooku and then body his ass. Dude, I love that, everything about that moment. I love the look of shock on Dooku's face, like, yo, I just got played. Because Dooku, during his apprenticeship with Darth Sidious, Dooku was doing the same shit Darth Sidious was doing. He was trying to find an apprentice to be able to kill Darth Sidious so that he could become the Sith Master, right? So Dooku was basically playing the same game that Darth Sidious was, but he realized, like, yo, I just got played. I just got worked. I'm about to get bodied here. I'm about to get murked, man. So I love that look of shock on Dooku's face. I love Ian McDiarmid's his delivery of "do it" there's a reason why that's iconic. It's so great. And then Anakin killing Dooku, and that music, that like eerie sounding like music or noise that you hear when Anakin chops Dooku's head off. Like, I remember seeing that for the first time and being like, holy shit, whoa, I was not expecting that. And it was dope to see. So yeah, I love everything about that scene. I think it's such a great opening to the film, but yeah. I love it because again, you get to see Anakin inching more and more so to the dark side. I love that it really encapsulates what we're going to be seeing as Star Wars fans in that movie. Like that movie very early sets up like, hey, this is kind of going to be a gut punch. You need to brace yourself here. And I do like that. But yeah, technically Anakin, he didn't have to fall to the dark side. He didn't have to succumb to Darth Sidious's manipulations, and he didn't have to be seduced by Darth Sidious. But him killing Dooku was one of the final straws. That basically, it wasn't the final straw, but it was basically setting in motion that our boy was about to turn into Darth Vader. So I love everything about that scene. So great question. Like I said, as soon as I saw him, like, yo, I got to answer this question. I love me some Revenge of the Sith. All right. For our last question, Wild Caveman asks, if Sidious was the most powerful Sith of all time, how did he lose so embarrassingly? So just like Luke tells him in Return of the Jedi, which, Return of the Jedi is back in theaters. I think, did it just drop? Was it this weekend? Can't remember, but yeah, Return of the Jedi is back in theaters. But anyway, just like Luke tells Darth Sidious in Return of the Jedi, Sidious's weakness was his overconfidence, right? He didn't think that he could be beaten by the rebels. Nor did he think that Anakin could be redeemed. I'm trying to remember exactly what Sidious tells Luke, but during that scene in Return of the Jedi, he's basically telling Luke, like, you can't redeem your father. Your father's too far gone. He was so confident that the rebels could not beat him because one of Sidious's strongest skills. So let me actually back up here for a moment. So Wild Caveman, in his question, he also mentioned that Sidious's implementation of destroying the Jedi, toppling the Republic, creating the Galactic Empire was masterful. How did he get to that point where he's doing all this stuff so masterfully? And then we see him in Return of the Jedi and then in The Rise of Skywalker just kind of like lose so easily. And I wouldn't necessarily, it's him losing so easily. It's just that he was so overconfident in himself and his ability to see the future. One of Sidious's strongest Force abilities was his ability to see the future. And that's why you see him multiple times saying, I've foreseen this. Everything is taking place, is happening just as I have foreseen. Because one of his strongest Force abilities is his ability to see the future through the Force. That ability was so strong in Sidious, he thought that over time he would be able to see the future almost perfectly through the Force. And so once he became the Emperor, Sidious basically took a back seat to running the galaxy. Like he still did, but a lot of the day-to-day minutia was pushed off onto the Moffs and other high-level Imperials. And Sidious was all about trying to figure out how to live forever. And he felt like, bro, I've got this on lock. The rebels ain't shit. They can't overthrow me. I'm going to go and just try to figure out how to live forever. Even when it got to the point where the Rebel Alliance was a serious threat, Sidious was still trying to figure out how to live forever. And he was still so confident in his abilities as a Sith Lord, and to be able to see the future, that he was like, there's no way, right? There's no way I could be defeated. There's no way Anakin could be redeemed. Well, Anakin was redeemed and he yeeted his ass down that reactor shaft. And then once Sidious was on Exegol, after he thrusted his essence into a clone on Exegol. He eventually starts building up the First Order and the Final Order. He once again was like, yo, there's no way that this ragtag group of resistance fighters that are a fraction of the size of what the Rebel Alliance was, there's no way they could defeat me. And that just shows you that he was so arrogant and so confident, overconfident in his abilities and himself that he felt, yeah, there's no way I could be defeated. Right? So yeah, I think that is why we see Sidious lose in both the Return of the Jedi and in Rise of Skywalker. He was just so confident, again, in Return of the Jedi, that the rebels couldn't defeat the Empire. Anakin can't be redeemed. I'm going to turn Luke Skywalker to the dark side, or I'm going to kill him. He didn't think that there was any other scenario where things could happen differently. And so that's why, like, his in terms of the canon explanation as why he returns, that's why he's not in his bodies are like decrepit, because he had not yet finalized the process for creating Force sensitive clones. He knew how to transfer his essence into a Force sensitive clone. He learned that from Darth Sidious, but the actual like technological ability of cloning Force sensitive clones, that hadn't really been ironed out yet, because Sidious was like, bro, I got time. We'll figure it out. And no one's going to kill me at this point. Well, that obviously is not how it worked out for our homeboy. So basically, to answer Wild Caveman's questions, it boils down to Sidious being overconfident in his abilities and thinking that there was no way he could lose to anyone. And I like that. I like that idea that it's kind of like with Darth Plagueis. You know, you think back to Revenge of the Sith, and when Sidious is telling Anakin the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, right? Darth Plagueis had become so powerful that the only thing he feared was losing that power, however the exact line goes. And that's kind of like with Darth Sidious. I'm trying to, what's the exact quote? I'm trying to remember how that quote goes. Something, yeah, the only thing he feared was losing his power, which he eventually did. And I mean, it's the same sort of thing with Darth Sidious, but yeah, he felt like there was no way he could be defeated. So that is it for questions, my friends. I really enjoyed answering these questions. The Q&A was always so fun. I was getting ready before the stream, and I was like super excited to do the Q&A. And I think, not 100% sure, I don't want to say this with 100% certainty. I think what's going to wind up happening is when there are shows that are premiering or running at the same, whenever we get a new show, that's a better way to say it. Whenever we get a new show, I think I'm going to do the Q&A bi-weekly, because it just winds up being a little bit easier for me with work, with other stuff, to be able to do the Q&A and to do streams for the shows. But now when we don't have shows, Disney Plus series, Aaron, I'll go back to doing the Q&A on a weekly basis. And so the last time we did the Q&A was about 2 weeks ago, and I was so pumped to do it today. I was really looking forward to it. These questions are always a lot of fun to answer, and it's always cool to be able to talk Star Wars and break down some of the stuff. But with that said, my friends, if you have not, now's a good time to like this video. Let me know down in the comments, is there anything that you agreed with? Any of my answers to these questions that you agreed with? If there's anything that you disagreed with, let me know down in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. Love to hear from you guys, so let me know your thoughts. Subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions if you haven't, you jabroni. What the hell are you doing if you're not subscribed to the channel? Follow us on TikTok at SW Transmissions. Now that Jedi Survivor is out, I'm going to be doing multiple streams throughout the week of me gaming and me playing Jedi Survivor. So, subscribe to the channel so you could watch and join along as we're going through Jedi Survivor. So we got the Q&A that's going to be happening weekly. We got shorts that are pretty much dropping daily at this point. I'm working on a video that I'm really excited to release that I think you guys are going to be excited about. So yeah, videos as well that we drop. So lots of good stuff happening with Star Wars Transmissions. So make sure to subscribe if you have not. With that said, my friends, I'm super excited. I'm going to play Halo. I haven't played Halo for and it's not been a week, but it's probably like 4 or 5 nights. So I'm so excited to play some Halo tonight. So I'm going to be playing Halo in a little bit here, and I'm pretty excited about that. So yeah. So Shane, is this the same Shane from SWOTOR from Stim Addicts? I was just about to sign off, but I saw in the chat Shane mentioned something, and if this is Shane from Stim Addicts from SWOTOR, what's up, my guy? If not, what's up, my guy? Glad you're joining, but about to sign off. But in the chat, Shane says Snoke as a character isn't very interesting because there's no real background. I'm like, what the hell is this? I like Snoke. I think Snoke is a cool idea. I like the idea that we've gotten some more information about him. It was very much kind of this what the hell is Snoke's deal when the sequel trilogy films were coming out. I think Snoke is kind of cool. I still this is a hill I will die on. Snoke getting killed in The Last Jedi was one of the coolest in theater moments for me. I was floored. But yeah, I'm cool with Snoke. I'm all right with Snoke, and we've been getting more and more information about him. But with that said, I'm going to sign off, guys. You have an excellent, excellent evening. May the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.